Thank you everyone for joining us to unpack the new foundation maths with VicMaths. What if you could go to our next slide and we'll kick off with an acknowledgement of country. So in the spirit of reconciliation, Cengage Australia acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to the elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Now just a little bit of housekeeping. So you know this webinar is definitely being recorded and the video and slides will be sent out next week to all who registered. So just in case you miss a slide or you see something and think you want to refer to it later, you will get it. We promise it'll come out next week. If you attend the full webinar, your complimentary copy of the text you selected when you registered will be sent to you after the book is published in September. We ask that if you do have any questions for our panelists, that you please use the Q&A for questions. Feel free to use the chat for any general comments or anything else, but please put questions in the Q&A. And if you have any further questions, you can reach us at our email at ost.secondary@cengage.com. And now I'd like to introduce tonight's panelists for you. First is Judy Binns. She's a mathematics coordinator and experienced author who has taught in urban and rural schools. She has an interest in motivating students with learning difficulties and wide experience in teaching senior practical mathematics courses. She co-wrote a successful mathematics series for Year 7-8 with Sue Thomson and has written for senior practical mathematics in New South Wales, Queensland and WA. Also tonight we'll be hearing from Sue Thomson, who's an experienced and prolific author and well known for writing and presenting senior practical mathematics. Sue's interests are in language development, financial literacy, and making mathematics accessible to all. And also joining us is our publisher from Nelson VICmaths, Robert Yen. Robert is a very experienced maths teacher, author of one of New South Wales best-selling series, New Century Maths, and our very own publisher. And we also have one of our sales team, Kim Lowe, with us tonight to help you out with any questions about VicMaths. Handing over to you, Judy.
Thanks, Jess. I would just like to welcome everybody and just outline what we will do in this time. We intend to outline this new study design and highlight for you the differences from the old one-year course and show you clearly what is involved in the new course. We want to consider what types of students study foundation maths and how that has informed our writing of the textbook. And we want to identify the features of Nelson VICmaths that will help these students to be successful. Overall, as you may well already know, that foundation maths has now become 4 units instead of 2, that further maths was renamed general maths units 3 and 4, and that across all the courses, all topics are compulsory now with no optional topics in any of the courses. In foundation maths, we have 4 areas of study: algebra, number and structure, data analysis, probability and statistics, a new area of discrete mathematics, which here is covered financial and consumer mathematics, and space and measurement. And in the front of our book, we have a study design grid so that you can see quickly and easily which chapters relate to which of the areas of study. Now, changes to the study design. Clearly, if you go from 2 units to 4 units, there will be quite a lot of changes. And the biggest one is probably that a very strong strand of algebra has been introduced across all 4 units. Financial mathematics has been introduced across all 4 units. And the work on data analysis has been extended to cover bivariate data, a lot more graphs and that sort of thing. So all these areas are what build the bulk of the new parts of the course. Units 1 and 2, I think, are somewhat easier because some of the more difficult concepts have been moved to units 3 and 4. So I think when you come to teach the Year 11 course, you'll find that a little more straightforward than it has been up till now. Units 3 and 4 then extend many ideas of the first 2 units with more applications and looking beyond the individual to a national and global outlook. This slide just gives you a little outline of what chapters are in each book. Hopefully the names of the chapters give you a fair idea of what's in them. And you can see from that where we have put in the new work and so on. Now, let's look at each of the areas of study in a bit more detail. So in the algebra, number and structure topic in units 1 and 2, we still have in chapters 2 and 5 work on number and on ratio. But what is new here is the algebra skills. As you can see in chapters 9 and 13, we have simple equations. We construct graphs using formulas. We look at the number plane. We look at graphing straight lines. So there's quite a lot of basic algebra involved in this units 1 and 2. And for those of you teaching year 11 this year, you may well find it useful to include some of this if you are able to, since they will be doing the new year 12 course next year. And much of this is assumed knowledge in that year 12 course. So to make life easier for yourself, you might like to try and squeeze some of it in year 11 at present. In units 3 and 4 in algebra and number, we have number applications, we have significant figures. So you'll see there chapters 2 and 4. We have direct and inverse variation, which is a significant extension of the work on ratio. And we look at more complex equations, more complex formulas, and that sort of thing. And so you can even see simultaneous equations in there, just to keep you on your toes. In the data analysis and probability and statistics section unit of study, there are a lot more types of graphs. And as I said before, the data analysis is extended. So in units 1 and 2, in chapters 3 and 7, we pretty much do what you've done normally in year 11, the different types of graphs that you're familiar with, the measures of central tendency and spread, and some work on comparing data sets back to back and stem and leaf and parallel box plots. So those are the 4 chapters there that go in units 1 and 2. In units 3 and 4, what has been, you can see that it's all new work. Chapter 3 is about the bias that can come into anything you do in statistics, in sampling, questionnaires, surveys, and in graphs. We review the basic measures of central tendency, but we look at grouped data, cumulative frequency, and percentiles. We introduce bivariate data, which is chapter 13, with scatter plots, lines of best fit, interpolation and extrapolation of those. And also in chapter 13, you'll find a whole lot of new graphs, which we've put on the next few slides just to show you what they look like. We have bubble graphs in the top left, the stacked area graphs, which have a percentage up the side, the radar charts, heat maps, and pictograms. We have mechographs, which are sort of like two-dimensional sector graphs, and sunburst graphs. So you can see there's quite a bit of new graph work involved. The construction of these is done using technology, but the understanding and interpretation is what the emphasis is on. Also in units 3 and 4, we look at the shape of the distribution, and we also look at some work on long-term data and graphs, national and global trends. And you'll find those in our last chapter, chapter 16, Australia and the World. And you can see on the right-hand side there the list of exercises that we've looked at a number of those things at a higher level. This is quite a difficult, I think, a difficult area for foundation maths students, and we hope that they will find it accessible both by using the internet and by relating it to things that they are more familiar with. The new areas of financial and consumer maths, they're not new in the sense that you've never seen them before, but they're new to the course. In units 1 and 2, we have earning and managing money, we have tax and GST and spending money and so on, and all those things probably that you did some of in junior school and hopefully can build on that. We have things like buying a car, budgeting, government allowances that are available, and pensions. And again, that involves a fair amount of internet work, but hopefully it helps them to know where to look for things. And at the wider level, there is some work on economic indicators, the CPI, interest rates, etc. So some of those things that they will come across or maybe hear on the news. In units 3 and 4, we get particularly into investing and borrowing, and most of that is using online financial calculators. So they don't have to do long, tedious but complex calculations. We make use of the online calculators and spreadsheets so that they are able to do the calculations and focus on what the information is telling them. You'll find that in investing money and in borrowing money. We also look at running a business and some business maths and buying and renting a home, those sorts of things. And then again, in that chapter 16, we include the national and world economy. And here just, you can see 2 of the chapters, running a business, paying tax and super, with an outline of what we cover in those different exercises in those. So chapter 12 is done thematically, but deals with the things that we're asked to look at about breaking even, GST and so on. The space and measurement area of study, the harder surface area work has been moved to what will be year 12, and there's a lot more work on units of measurement. And you can see there the 4 chapters in the year 11 book that will relate to this. So we have length, perimeter, area, surface area, volume, capacity, mass and time, all at a fairly basic level, reviewing formulas and so on. We have 2D shapes and 3D solids, and we relate those to house plans and scale diagrams. Again, fairly basic work there. And then the work on routes and itineraries and so on, that actually is specific to speed, distance, time, but also involves some work on using GPS, which of course is what most of these students will use if they need to go anywhere. In units 3 and 4, we have some topics that we had in the old course, transformations and symmetry, scale diagrams and house plans, but we now have added to that similarity, enlargements, perspective drawings. Most of that is in chapter 8 on creating designs. We look at accuracy of measurements and non-metric measurements. That's for chapters 4 and 5, and included in chapter 4 on accuracy is significant figures from the number area. And then the surface area and volume and paper to reality look in more detail at areas, surface areas and volumes, which is extended to pyramids, cones and spheres. As part of the foundation maths study design, it is mandatory that students complete mathematical investigations. And we will talk more about this later on. So for each unit in 1 and 2, they have to do a 2-week mathematical investigation. It has to be based, obviously, on the areas of study and use what they have learnt. The study design outlines 3 components for an investigation: formulation, exploration, and communication. And ideally, these can be woven through the class lessons and perhaps have a investigation running, and as you do things in class, they can do a bit more of those investigations. In units 3 and 4, of course, they now have more formal assessment, and so they have school-based assessment, which are all investigations, 2 from unit 3, 1 from unit 4, and then they have the VCE examination, which is will be very new for these students, and they will, I think, find it quite a challenge in the sense that they probably don't like doing exams and don't think they're any good at it. At this point, we don't have any knowledge of what that will look like. We don't have a sample examination. When we do, then we'll be able to pass on more information about that. So, what types of students study foundation maths? Because we have to take into this account, as we did in writing our book, but also as you as teachers. So it's designed for students who will go to work or further training after year 12. Often these students are already working part-time. Often they work more hours part-time than they probably put into their schoolwork outside of the school day. And so we need to take that into account. I think one of the important things is that many of them will think that they can't do maths. So they've chosen what they see as maybe the easiest course, and they just think they've failed maths in the past, and why should this be any different? So they come to it with certainly with quite a negative attitude, or not expecting to be successful. They also often think maths is irrelevant because they've sat and done 20 equations and they think, when will I ever use that? We hope in the course of our books that we will show that they can do maths, that they don't need to fail, and that it is very relevant to them. So we have taken a number of features in our books in order to make it accessible to these students. So first of all, we use the skills in relevant practical situations. We don't just give 20 questions on finding a percentage. So for example, here we're looking at inflation, which involves use of percentages, but we've placed it within the context of buying groceries and so on. We look at inflation changing the cost of jeans or a new car or whatever. So things that they might actually do and buy and so on. We also show how to use accessible technology like spreadsheets for calculations. So some spreadsheets we give them. This is an example of a compound interest spreadsheet. It is provided on Nelson VICmaths for them to download, and they can investigate compound interest without having to do complex calculations, and using the technology. Hopefully they'll learn a little about the technology as well. And we also integrate the use of the internet into the exercises. So this is from chapter 1 of the Year 12 book on interest calculations, and it uses a calculator at the calculator site. And Money Smart also has them, you may know of others. And so we give them screenshots, we show them how to use it, and again, using it to help do the mathematics for them. You'll see we've sort of highlighted there the little margin references. That gives you an idea if there are other worksheets that are involved, if there's a spreadsheet, and it also gives you the web link. So those turn up near most exercises or sections of the work. And so let's look at a little bit more detail what we do to try and make maths relevant and accessible. So in our use of percentages, this is out of the chapter on earning money. And so we give an example of a career, what you might be doing. We hope that just gets their interest, and maybe when they look at enough of them, might give them some ideas what they want to do. We then look at holiday pay, which is obviously a percentage question, but again, in the context of taking 4 weeks holiday, which I think the students will find interesting. We apply formulas in different areas. So this is the beginning of the exercise on formulas and equations. You will see that the first question is about height and length of your femur bone, used by forensic scientists in their investigations often. The second one, of course, you might be familiar with from physics, but it's a real formula, and if the students ask, you can explain what it's about. Similarly, things like taxi trips and formulas for finding things in mathematics. In data analysis, we have tried to use data that's topical, relevant and engaging. In that sense, we've tried to relate, not only in data, but in fact across all the units, relate things to things in Victoria that students may be familiar with. Topical here is, of course, COVID-19, and this might actually look like a good day given what's happening currently. So I don't know, but this is, so when we did our heat maps, we took one of Victoria and and showed its usage there. We also link data to media reports. This is one of our investigations about sample sizes in polls that, again, students may be unaware of what the sort of things that they can find out in this. I would just point out that quite a few of the investigations, if not all of them in the book, are part of the coursework. They actually help students to find out some of the things they're meant to know that are mentioned in the study design. And so this is an example of one where they are finding out how it really works. We also have a section on buying a car. And so This is one question out of the exercise on buying a car, where they have to, again, visit the website. So using the internet in their lessons, in the exercises, and finding out actual information here about what registration will cost them, depending where they live, and also depending whether they have a petrol car or electric or hybrid car, because there are differences in those. So hopefully it brings a little bit of social education in, and also they can, if they don't live in any of these postcodes, they can put in their own postcode if they want to, and so on. So it hopefully links to A, being relevant to them living in Victoria, and B, relevant to them because they might one day buy a car. It's often the first thing these students will do. And we have a whole chapter on running a business. And so this little bit here just shows the beginning of the section on will we break even. We draw graphs for income and expenses. We look at break-even points, which we've previously looked at in algebra. And so it's bringing in what they hopefully have learnt in algebra into and showing a practical application of it. In the space and measurement area of study, one of the big things is looking at house plans and renovations. We pretty much have a whole chapter on that. And so this shows you the chapter problem for the particular chapter that is all about house plans and so on. With chapter problems, we set them at the start. We give them a little nudge to maybe have a go at it. And then we provide a solution. So this just shows you the opening to the chapter. It shows you that you're going to look at house plans and scales and so on. It also mentions that there's an extended investigation in this chapter, which we'll talk more about later.
Oh, sorry, Judy, can I just add to this page? We also have what will we do in this chapter, which are like, it's a bit like the study design dot points, but it's in plain English for both the student and the teacher. And then we also have often asked question, how are we ever going to use this? And where the author team has listed applications of the skills that are being taught in this chapter. So this is quite a short chapter. It's only got 4 sections in it. And every chapter does begin with a chapter problem. And at some point during the chapter, students will be able to solve the problem. Okay, so let's have a look at the next page. Okay, back to you, Judy.
And so this shows you at the end of an exercise there, you'll see the question mark, and it just says to the students, okay, you've covered what you now need to know, have a go at the chapter problem. So hopefully the teacher, you as teachers can use that and maybe set it at the end of class or a start of another one. And then at the end of the chapter, we provide the solution. And hopefully they see that shows them the best way in a sense. Also in space and measurement, we look at GPS navigation. So this is an exercise in chapter 14 where we provide screenshots from a phone, and it's all travel around Melbourne and Victoria. And it points out to students the information that they can get from their phone or GPS. We're now going to look in more detail at the work on investigations, and I'm going to hand over to Sue for that.
Thank you, Judy. When we're learning mathematics, we learn calculation skills, and our students can get very good at doing these calculations, but these skills alone aren't enough to help us solve the sort of problems that we encounter along our life's journeys. The purpose of studying mathematics is to learn how to solve these sorts of problems. I find myself very frequently having to help our neighbours solve problems. And I remember one of our dear neighbours saying to me one day after we did an area and circumference of a circle question, now that's the sort of maths they should have taught us in school. Whereas in reality, it's exactly what we taught them. We just didn't teach them the connection between the mathematics and how they were going to use it. And that's what I think the integral part of this course is about. As a junior teacher, perhaps my biggest moment involved the realisation that most students can't go from calculation skills to problem solving. Neither can they go easily from word problems to solutions. That's assuming, of course, the language is easy enough for them to understand. I had no appreciation of the critical part language and reading has on success in mathematics. This realisation has shaped everything I've done since. I'm quite passionate about making sure we teach language, and we address that in our books, and make sure that what we put in our books has of a language level that we can expect our students to be able to understand. No one can do a question if we don't understand the language of it. For example, we could ask students to calculate 5% of $300,000, and they can do that. Well, most of the time they can, but knowing how much of a $300,000 mortgage at 5% interest does end up going to cost us, well, that's a skill we have to teach them. And that's the fundamental reason why we're having practical questions and investigations through our textbooks. Investigations make us think about what we need to do, how to do it, and then think about whether it makes sense. Investigations are relevant to the chapter and to what the students are learning. We just don't throw them in because we've got a space on the page where we need to fill it up. They're there for a reason. This particular investigation on scams came as a result of me trying to help my elderly mother realised that she didn't need to try and talk to somebody who was phoning her and when it was a recorded message. My staff have always said to me, it's okay for you. You've got a good idea. You can think about these things. We can't. What I'd like to say to everybody is that it's easy. All you've got to do is think about what you're doing in your own real life. Your real life gives you thousands of opportunities. Oh, goodness, yes, I could use that. My children say to me, don't you dare put that in a maths question, Mum. As you work through these investigations that we've got in our text, you'll see what my life's all been about. It's a summary of my life through investigations. This investigation, an extended one that you could use as a basis for a school assessment if you wanted to, came about because my son and I was helping him plan an extension to his house. So I thought, hello, we could do this. We could use this as an investigation. And of course, Judy was really good at SketchUp, so that helped. And presto, out comes a good investigation that can end up being an extended assessment task if you want to. It's what my life's all about. The study guide provided us with some scaffolding and we've embellished it. We were given the formulation, exploration and communication headings. And then I thought, what does that actually mean? So we designed a sheet which is available on the website. And on the website, there's plenty of space around the outside of each of these boxes for people to write their ideas. It's what do you have to do? Traditional maths problems that we've solved over the years had exactly the right amount of information in it. Everything you needed to solve the question was there, and anything you didn't need wasn't there, and you had to use everything. Life's not like that. When we come to solve problems in real life, we have to work out what's relevant, what else do I need to know, where can I get that information, or how can I work it out? Early in year 11, we've done an investigation with a suggested solution. We take the students through a practical investigation to help them learn the process. The answers are in the back of the book, but that's the only time we put the answers in the back, because there is lots and lots of ways you could go about doing investigation. There's not one correct way to do anything. Personally, I think one of the reasons why a lot of our students think they can't do maths is that they don't think like their teacher. They think differently. and they think they're wrong. Whereas we need to encourage our students to use the different approaches, not to give them the feeling they're wrong because they're different to us. It's an alternate way to go about doing things. And here are some examples of investigations. The workplace deductions I thought would be really very useful for students. Going into a job and knowing what you can use as a tax deduction to minimise the tax you have to pay. Well, here we're going to learn how to do it. What other maths course teaches students these skills? So I think there's lots of people who don't know what they can claim, and here is where they learn what you can do and how to keep the records for it. There's something on GST, something for the sports-minded people in Will Your Team Win? They're just a few of the many, many investigations, and I would like to seriously recommend that you ask your students to do this. This is where they're going to learn skills they're going to use past year 12. We want students who are going to be a success in life, not just a success at school. I hope our books are going to help them be a success at school, but let's help them succeed at life as well.
Okay, can I just also add, I hope when you're listening to all these, how we're describing the textbook, the Nelson VICmaths, that we're publishing a different type of senior maths textbook. And I've been jotting down some notes. I think it's important to realize that we put the student first, and you can see in our discussion and in our pages that we're really putting the student first rather than the content, because we're looking at the students' backgrounds and interests and context, and we're trying to give them skills to survive in everyday life. These skills that they're learning now are not necessarily just for the future. They can start applying these skills from today. We also put the applications first. We teach them the math skills, but as you can tell from the chapter names, we are taking a thematic approach to the foundation maths course, so that the applications come first, and then, but we're still teaching the skills, but we're teaching the skills through the application. And finally, the third thing is that we're putting the language first. So I don't think we're like a typical maths book where there's a lot of, I suppose, mathematical symbolism. There are a lot of English words, I know that, but we've always been very careful in the reading level and the type of language that we use, the level of reading, and also the types of problems, the context of the problems that we use. We've always tried to include problems and applications that teenagers would find useful. Okay, here's the next slide. I'll hand back to Judy now.
We talked about these students feeling that they have failed at maths or they can't do it. And so there are particular aspects or features of the book that we have included to provide students opportunities to be successful, to think, yeah, I can do that. And so, as we've mentioned before, every chapter has a chapter problem that can be solved once the specific skills required for it have been taught. And we also provide a solution to that. But hopefully students will get to the point in the chapter and do it for themselves and go, hey, yeah, I can do that. At the start of each chapter, there is an excerpt from the study design. So particularly for teachers, I would think that most students won't read it, but you know exactly what is covered in that chapter. And it also, we list the online chapter resources that are available. Again, students may go and practice some of them, but on the whole, teachers will know without having to search through a whole lot of stuff exactly what extra activities there are online.
I'll also just add here that there are teacher resources available as well on the Nelson MindTap website. So we'll be providing topic tests a teaching plan, and also work solutions to every exercise.
Okay, we aim in the writing of the textbook to give clear and concise explanations, that there's a focus on the literacy, as we've talked about, the understanding the language, and there is a glossary included, and any word that's in the glossary is in bold blue in the text itself. So commission, we give a brief explanation, but if they forget what it is and want to look it up later, I have a glossary to do that. We also provide hints through the textbooks. One is just a reminder of how many weeks in a year and how many quarters in a year and so on. But at different points throughout the textbook, there are little hints just to remind them of something they need to know to do the question. At the end of each chapter, there's a keyword activity. Again, this is part of our emphasis on literacy. This particular one is a word match of words and their meanings. There are others that are closed passages where they have the words and have to put them in the right places. There are others where they might have a crossword and they have to write the definitions of the word or read the definitions of the word to work out what words go into the crossword. So there are a number of different ways that we have, and sometimes they just have to write a few sentences and explain things. So number of different ways to try and help the students remember the language that's specific to mathematics that they've learnt in that chapter. We also have a glossary and an index, as I mentioned. The index is particularly useful probably for the teacher, but if you are looking for something, certainly you can find it there. Because this course now has an examination, a VCE examination at the end of Year 12, we have included a couple of features that were not in any of our previous books, in our previous book in Victoria. At the end of every chapter, we've included a test yourself, which reviews the work from the chapter. Each question is referenced back to the exercise that it's testing, and so students can go back and look things up, and it just helps them to go over and revise the work from that chapter. And then every 4 chapters, we have practice sets. This is a beginning to give the students some experience of doing topics all mixed in together. When they get to do the VCE exam, that'll presumably have all the topics represented. And so the practice sets are an intermediate step going from only testing or revising one topic to having every topic together. So these come every 4 chapters. They include multiple choice and short answer questions, and they revise mixed topics in doing that. And so these last 2, we hope, will help prepare students for doing a VCE examination. I'd now like to hand over to Kim, who's our learning consultant in Victoria, to talk a little more about the books.
Thanks so much, Judy. That was really informative. I must admit, I sat in on our, I think it was general maths or specialist maths webinar last night, and it was totally over my head, but I feel much more comfortable in the foundation maths course, that's for sure. As you can see on the screen, we've got both our books for Year 11 and Year 12, and they're priced at $89.95, and that does include the physical book and also the digital Nelson VICmaths. But if you are a digital only school and you only want the digital component of the textbook, then that is available as well for $49.95. And if you happen to be a head of department or are teaching other maths subjects, you can see here that we've got the full suite of maths subjects. So we've got general, specialist and methods. And for each of those, we also have a workbook as well, which is called our Mastery Workbook. Again, the price of the student book and the digital is $89.95. Or we are offering a pack with the student book and the Mastery Workbook for $99.95. Again, digital only, so Nelson VICmaths only, $49.95, or the Mastery Workbook standalone for $29.95. And for methods and general, we also have our very popular study notes. These are great for students to revise. They've got fully worked solutions, great study and exam preparation advice in those, and they're $34.95 each. And if you would like to know more information, then Anne-Marie, Jill or myself, as your learning consultants, are more than happy to come out to school to walk you through the book, give you a full demonstration of the online Nelson MindTap. We know things are changing in schools with lots of COVID and sickness, so at any time we're happy to do an online appointment as well, so it doesn't have to be face-to-face. But if you've got any questions whatsoever, please reach out to one of us. And I know we've got a few questions in the chat, so I'll hand back to Jess and we'll be able to take those. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. So if anyone does have any, we've got a few questions in the Q&A. If anyone has the questions that they've been thinking about asking, now's a good time and we'll go through them. So the first question is, are the spreadsheets able to be used across different applications? For instance, Excel, Google Sheets, Numbers, and freeware programs, or are they Excel specific, utilizing Excel formulas that may work differently in other programs?
Robert, I think that's your question.
Okay, the spreadsheets are all in Excel. So they are included on the Nelson MindTap website. Yes, so they're just basically in Excel format. So if you use one of the other spreadsheet programs, you would have to adjust the formulas. Yeah, I'm not that well versed in spreadsheets to know whether you can transfer from one format to the other. Okay, next question.
From Ken, what average percentage in topic tests should students in Year 10 achieve in order to do foundation maths in Year 11, in your opinion?
I personally am not sure, in that I don't know if the topic tests are tests that are done across all of Year 10 or just in your class. I would think any student, in fact, even a student who hasn't done maths for a bit and comes back to school or something, could find foundation maths accessible. And many of the topics in it go over work from junior school, and so they would have another chance to learn those things. So I'm not sure that I would set a minimum for this course. I don't know whether Sue and Robert have a different idea.
Yeah, I mean, that is a difficult question to answer, because as you can tell from the profile that we give of the foundation math student, it's really the type of student that we're offering this course to, rather than what mark that student got in an exam. We don't think of foundation maths as being a course for students who are necessarily bad at maths. It's really more for students who are disengaged with the maths, who can achieve in maths. They just need to be taught a course that is accommodating to them. It's a numeracy course. So the foundation math student, I would imagine there's quite a range of students who can be foundation math students. They are students who are not going to go on to uni, for example. So they're not necessarily bad at maths. They're just not going to matric, or they're not attempting a uni course that will require a lot of maths. So it's a good senior practical maths course. Sue, I don't know if you have anything to add? Yes,
I would agree that this course should not be beyond most students, even if they haven't done very much maths in the past or been disengaged. I also happen to think that the course could be well suited to students who want to go to a uni course that's not maths orientated. Some of them who, well, even really top solicitors need to be able to get their bill right, don't they? And I remember my husband teaching somebody like that at one stage, who actually blossomed in the bottom level of maths once, he suddenly saw a reason for it, and he ended up doing very, very well as a solicitor, and he got his bills right.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Next question from Joshua. Will the books include explicit text from the study designs so students reviewing for exams can see where they can go to see a particular dot point?
Yeah, the short answer to that is yes. You might have seen in one of the slides that at the front of each chapter, we do list the study design excerpt that is relevant to the chapter. So that's a strong yes from me.
Okay, and another question from Wayne. When you wrote the investigations, how do you think they will be assessed, especially at 12? Example, rubric, closed question and answer, open-ended question with a rubric.
Well, I guess that's a question for me. I'd be using a rubric for doing these, and I'd be giving it to the students at the time that I gave them the questions, and so they know exactly what they have to do well. Is that enough of an answer?
I think so. Thank you, Sue. Okay, that's all the questions we have.
Sorry, Jess, I was just going to say, however, we don't have any inside information from the Victorian Department of Education about how any expectations they have, excuse me, about marking investigations. So they may give us something more. Oh, excuse me, I'm going to mute.
Okay, that's a good point, Judy, that we are not pretending to be experts on assessment in this course. We don't have any inside information. We just know about what has worked well for us, for students of this type.
Okay, I'll read the next question. Some of my students respond well to video tutorials. Will this be available? Yes, there are video tutorials in Nelson VICmaths on the website. There are also worksheets, basically worksheets and video tutorials and web links. So additional content. There's also, there's plenty in the textbook, but these is additional bonus content that you can use in your teaching. And as I said, with the teacher website, there are topic tests and work solutions.
Great, thank you, Robert. And that looks like that was our last question, unless anyone else has one. Now's the time.
I've left my email address there on that last slide there in case you need to email us any more questions, as well as the website where you can learn more about VicMaths, not just for foundation maths, but for general methods and specialists as well. So we are publishing for units 1 to 4 in all 4 subjects, all 4 courses.
Thank you. And the recording and the slides will be sent out of this webinar will be sent out next week. And there are page proofs available of almost the entire series at this point. So if you are interested, please reach out to Kim and her team. And we can get you some inside look into the series. There is also very soon we'll have trials of the Nelson VICmaths if you'd like to look at the digital as well. So I'd like to say a big thank you to our panelists for all their knowledge, sharing all their knowledge tonight, and a big thank you to everyone in the audience who attended. Thank you, and we hope to see you at another Nelson webinar. Good night.